Hello and welcome to another video. Today we'll be creating an IAM user, a S3 bucket, and giving that user specific access to the bucket all through Terraform. Let's get started. First, going over to the console, we can see that nothing has been created. Yep. The user is one created previously. We're going to be creating a different user under the name of test or tester, and we'll do all of that within VS Code Studio. So let's move over to there. First, let's create the provider file. Within the provider file, HashiCorp AWS version 3.3. Now let's create the main Terraform file. Okay, so first let's create the bucket. And then we'll reference it as log bucket. Next we need to give the bucket a name. With this, please note that S3 bucket names must be globally unique amongst AWS customers. So even if another user has a private bucket called let's say test bucket or something like that, we won't be able to use our bucket. So that's where I'm going to make sure my bucket name is very unique, and you should probably do the same. And just add a note here as well. Next, let's specify the tags for it. My bucket log, and then the environment is going to be a test. Okay, so now the bucket has been created. Next will be the bucket versioning. With bucket, we'll use the bucket reference as specified here to then make sure that it's versioned. So and we can use this reference our previous bucket, so it'd be s3 bucket.log underscore bucket and then .id. And versioning by itself is deprecated, so we'll need to add versioning configuration and then specify the status equal enabled. There we go. Yeah, so now we can specify the bucket policy and then resource. There we go. That doesn't need to be AWS again. Then we can reference our bucket again. Something's wrong here. Is it a comma? Oh yeah, it's waiting for what I was just about to type in. And it's JSON1 encode, split that. And here we can add in the JSON code, or JSON, we can add the JSON information. Okay, great. So here's the JSON information, and just to add, if you're following this along, please add in your own account ID, and you can find that. So account ID, and I've specified the user, which is going to be tester, as that's the user we want to create. This isn't created yet, but we can move on to creating that now. Versions, the standard 2012, and I've referenced the extremely unique bucket name. And here are the actions: S3 list bucket, S3 get object bucket, and S3 put object. So here, depending on the security requirements, granting full S3 access might be overly permissive. Even though this is a test environment, it's worth defining more specific permissions for S3 actions, which is what we've done considering the list bucket, get object, and put object. But we can also use S3, and that pretty much gives it all of the permissions to do anything within an S3 bucket. And now let's create the IAM user. The name's going to be what we've referenced up here, so tester. and the path is going to just be, and that should be everything. For those of you that are familiar with creating IAM users, you'll notice we haven't created an IAM policy for this user. That's because it's not necessary. As I've stated before, we've created a bucket policy and then we've specified the user that we want to give certain actions to within that principle. So now we can Terraform, initialize and apply all of this. But first let's save. First let's plan. It should add around 3 or 4 resources. Okay, that's interesting. The provider does not support versioning. Okay, spelling error. Yep, so let's resave that. You don't really need to initialize again, but it's just a habit I have. Let's plan it, make sure everything's okay. Okay, great. 4 resources. Now we can apply that. Okay, we can see the resources have been added, and yep, everything as specified. So we can see the user, the path, the bucket's been created, and the bucket policy, as well as versioning. Great. Let's have a look in the console. Okay, so yep, we can see that the region and the bucket's been created, or the bucket's been created in the specified region. Let's look at users. Okay, great. We can see the new user's been created. Let's go into the permission policies. As I stated before, permissions weren't created for the user, they were created for the bucket. So if we look within the bucket, we can see, yep, the permissions here exactly as requested, which is great. It allows for least privilege. And now that's all done, we can now Terraform destroy. And now that's completed. Thank you for watching.